And recording has started. And so, all right, we'll go ahead and get started. I am going to pop up my screen here. You should already be able to see it. I actually have the syllabus pulled up. Jessica, you're the only one I can see. So can you see it? Yeah, okay. I just want to make sure. Um, so I want to go over the CBM quickly. I know I've went over it a couple times, but just again, just to make sure everyone feels good and we're all on the same page. Make sure you truly understand. So I've gotten down here now. Use the breakdown. Probably making you dizzy scrolling so quick. So here we go. Quick review on CBMs. Make sure everyone's good. So same section, identifying information. We've done that on previous two reports, so really nothing's new. Just making sure that you name the tests or the probes that you use. Remember, probes basically the same thing. The date or dates that you administered those probes. Remember, we were asking you to get 4 to 6 of them, okay, to get you some data points. So list those dates that you gave them. Explain the skill that's being measured by that probe, kind of the purpose of it, reason why you selected that particular probe. And then here, using the pseudonym, age, disability, background information, if you have used the same student, remember for this here, you can just copy it and paste it right over into the report for this week if it's the same student. Okay, no need to reinvent the wheel on that. Anything from the regular classroom teacher observation or anything you observed you want to include, and then any type of pertinent family information. Okay. The next area, remember, is one of the new sections that I mentioned last week. It's the probe and intervention. So it will come immediately after identifying information. We haven't put this in before. It's new, this report. Okay. So on this, you're going to name and describe the probe that you use, kind of the rationale behind it. Describe the quantity and frequency of the probe. Okay. How many times and how often, how close were your probe administrations? Did you spread them out or did you do them over 2 or 3 days? As long as you have 4 to 6, just kind of explain when you gave them. Then you're going to talk about any type of intervention that you used. Depending on your students' scores, when you give this, they may have an upward trajectory the whole time. You don't see a drop in those data points when you plot them or those scores. So if it's continuous improvement, there's really no need to put in an intervention line. That's only when your scores drop. Okay. If you don't have a need for that intervention line, just explain why. Hey, during the administration of the probes, the student continuously made positive progress. There were no indication of declining scores, therefore no intervention was used or implemented during this time of collecting data. That's all you got to say. Just provide an explanation why you did not, if that's the case. Okay? If you did put an intervention in and after the intervention was put in and the student's score still dropped, you will need to explain any type of modification that you made to the intervention. If none, included in that explanation. Therefore, as a result of no interventions, therefore there was no need for a modification. Okay, real simple, real easy. Next section is your test interpretation and results section. You have been used to doing this in the first two reports. If you remember, we're adding something new into this section compared to what you've done. We've been showing tables, charts, and graphs with the raw data. And then you showed me some tables, charts, and graphs on the norm reference. And we added the bell curve display in there. This time we're going to add the table, chart, or graph that where you go in and plot your data points. You'll show that intervention line if there is any. You want to make sure to identify the baseline and you'll want to make sure you put your aim line. That is your projection of how that student's going to score. Okay, so make sure you have a baseline, intervention line if needed. Definitely need the aim line in there showing your projection of how they're going to score. Okay, so don't forget to do that one. Last week I pointed this out to you. I'm going to do it again. Remember that one graph alone by itself is worth 50 points. Okay, on that one. So don't overlook it, guys. Remember that. All right. The rest of the test and interpretation section is pretty much the same. You're going to explain those results. You'll refer to those tables, charts, and graphs. Support all conclusions using your data. Make sure you highlight their strengths that you identified from the probes on the CBM and also their what you feel like are their weak areas. And we've been doing that on the previous ones. That's not new. Okay. You'll have the recommendation and conclusion section. Been used to doing that. Make sure you highlight instructional planning, including type of instructional methods that you're going to recommend. Include if you are suggesting that content be modified, uh, such as changing a grade level, maybe dropping it down, and just kind of support it with some of the data that you collected. Okay. Here is your second new section. Just a reminder, it's a reflection. Remember, I told you last week, guys, there is no right or wrong answer on this. It's just your personal reflection on these items right here, asking you to explain at least three things that you learned about the CBM you administered. Okay. The next thing you want to make sure you include in the reflection section is discuss if you would use CBM again and why. Support your stance, whether you would or whether you would not, with at least two pieces of data to support that. If you wouldn't, that's fine. I'm not going to count it off or not give you the points. This is your personal reflection, so you can't mess it up unless you just don't do it. Okay. The last thing to include in the reflection section is at least, or I'm sorry, outline what you feel are two strengths and two weaknesses of CBM, of using the CBM assessments. Just identify what you feel like are two strengths and what you feel like might be two weaknesses. Okay, and that will wrap that section up. And then we have the organization and the mechanics section. Make sure, guys, I still have some of you that are forgetting to include your lesson, or I'm sorry, your permission form. Okay. Don't forget to include that. And then you'll do a lesson plan over the data that you collected in CBM. And I still have some that are forgetting to do those and attach them. So don't forget those, guys. You'll see this assignment's worth 240. It's your largest one because it takes a little bit longer to do these. But if you look, let's say you forgot to do the lesson plan, and let's go back up here and let's say you forget to um, include that one chart. Those two items alone right there are 70 points. So don't forget those items, guys. Make sure you add that second chart or graph. Don't forget your lesson plan. All right. Remember, this is 240, so it's got the highest point value out of everything that we've done this whole semester. All right. Now, one thing I'll tell you before we roll down to the mock IEP, if you feel good and you've already got it done and want to submit it, you can go ahead and submit it and I'll score it and get it back to you. So if you're wanting to get kind of a little bit ahead, because remember, this is due Sunday at midnight, then you have that quick turnaround for the mock IEP that's due Wednesday at 4. We have it due in the middle of the week that early because it takes quite a bit of time for me to go through and score those videos. Okay, because I have to submit the grades on or before noon that following Monday. All right, so it's a pretty quick turnaround. I just need a little bit more time to review the videos. Okay, so if you feel good, have the CBM done, you want to submit it, you can do that. Okay, I'm at home the rest of the week. I'm off work due to that surgery, so I'll have more accessibility, so I'll check it more frequently through the day. And as those come in, I'll score them for you. Okay. Is there anything question you want to ask me on the CBM before I roll down and go over the mock IEP again quickly? Is there any questions or clarifications you might need? Oh, it's all good. Okay, I'm gonna scroll on down here. We're gonna touch base on the mock IEP. Okay, so here we are. We're down on the mock IEP video point allotment. This is in your syllabus. It will start on page 28. Okay, if you need to know the quick reference. All right, I'm going to talk about this top part, spend a lot of time, most of my time on this. Guys, if you follow this and create you an outline to follow when you're doing the video and you cover all these areas right here, you're going to be fine. There's nothing to worry about. You've already collected all the data, all the information, except the CBM, which you're in the process of finishing up, doing your report. So you've already got the first two assessments done. As I mentioned last week, there are multiple ways to do this. Okay, probably, in my opinion, based on experiences of doing this class and seeing people do it different ways, probably the easiest method or platform to use to do this mock IEP, since everyone's used to it, is Zoom. Okay, since we use it so much at Fort Hays, you probably use it a lot in your district. Doing your video recording on Zoom. One thing I was sharing with Jessica a while ago, she had a question. I'm going to cover it now. One of the probably the best ways to help keep you on track is when I've seen graduate students go in and they go right down this outline and they create slides in a PowerPoint or a Google slide deck, either one, and they create slides and they put their information in that slide. So, for example, and you don't have to do it like this, I'm just throwing this out as a suggestion. Slide one, it would say introduction, and it would have all the IEP, all the um, team members on it. And they go right through there and introduce those team members. Okay. I know they're not there and you know it, but it's just the formality. The next slide would show the purpose of this IEP meeting, and you give the explanation on that slide deck. The next slide would show all the assessments that you used and explain why you use those. Okay, so you're going to have a slide that says informal assessment and it explains the informal assessment, why you selected it. Go to the next slide, norm reference, which one you used, why you selected it. The last one, CBM. So there's a slide for each one of them to help keep you on track. Next slide, present levels of performance and progress. So you would give a brief summary on that slide deck, how Johnny scored, their current level of performance, and how they progressed as you gave them these different assessments. Okay. The next few slides could be when you go in there and explicitly explain each performance or the performance on each assessment. And then you will also include your tables, charts, and graphs. Okay, so you could import those right into that slide deck, and that information will be on there as you're sharing it. Don't forget to include those. Okay, if you don't feel comfortable with technology, that's fine. Remember, I said you could literally hold up your charts and graphs and point to it as your explanation if you don't feel comfortable doing a screen share. Either way is acceptable, but please make sure you show and present that evidence, those tables, charts, and graphs. Next thing is you want to make sure you highlight what you felt like were the three strengths of the student throughout your assessments. Could be one from informal, one from norm reference, one from CBM, could be two from one and one from another. Whatever you feel like are the strengths, then we need you to make sure that you talk about what you feel like are the student strength, or I'm sorry, weak areas or areas in need of improvement. Okay, so make sure you explain both. Hey, through the assessment process, I noticed Johnny did this, this, and this really well. But on the other hand, something I want you to be aware of, I noticed that he struggled and appears to have a weak area doing, and then explain what it was. Okay. Next two things are SMART goals. Two short term, two long term. So a lot of times for this class, I always say, hey, let's just go under the premise that the short term goal is going to be for like a 9 week period, and the long term goal is going to be from the point of the meeting until the end of the year. Okay. For this purpose of this video. Okay. So just kind of playing on the short term being a 9 week goal, and then the long term would be for the year or a year from the meeting, from the meeting date. Okay, when you do the annual review.
Are they the same kind of goals? Like, are they the same goal, but it's just like in 9 weeks, we're going to progress to here. Then in a year, we're going to
Exactly.
progress to here, but it's the
Yeah.
same wording in the
It
goal.
could be the same goal. Yes. Yeah. You want to see those. You feel like those are the main goals. This is where you want to see Johnny within 9 weeks as a short-term goal, but long-term, this is what we're expecting. Okay. After you state those goals, the short-term and the long-term, and you're getting ready to wrap up the meeting, just kind of go over with the parents or guardians and what some expectations you have in order for them to help support and accomplish the goals that you've established, those short-term goals. So what are some things that mom and dad or aunt and uncle, grandma, grandpa, whoever's the guardian or, over that student, what are some things that you or would ask or recommend of them to do at home to help support what you're trying to do at school? Okay. I'll give you an easy one. It might be something as simple as sitting down 5 nights a week and reading with the child for 15 to 20 minutes. It could be something that simple. Okay. And then you're going to do the conclusion to the meeting. And you want to make sure does anyone from the team here today have any questions that you want to ask? And you just kind of sit there for 2 to 3 seconds and say, if not, want to thank you again for coming in today to review the goals and the testing data that I collected and look forward to working with you in Johnny Joe's journey as we work toward the short term and long term goals that we just agreed on. And please feel free to contact me at any time if you ever have questions regarding Johnny and his goals and IEP. Thank you. That's it. You conclude the meeting. Okay? It's that easy. All right. Again, you can create slide decks, create slides for each one of these steps. If you feel comfortable with technology, you don't have to. Okay. You could copy this and have it laid on your keyboard and do the recording of yourself presenting all this information without a slide deck, without a screen share. Just make sure that you are showing charts and graphs and referring to them if you have to hold them up like that. Either way is acceptable as long as you cover all those areas. Okay. For me on my end, one thing that I'm really looking at is the presentation skills. Do you feel confident, comfortable presenting that? You have been immersed in the data, you've been administering the test and collecting the information. I'm looking just for your presentation skills on presenting that. Okay, I'll use an example last week that as an administrator coming into a meeting, there's nothing worse than if the SPED teacher is not prepared, if they are not organized, everything is just displaced and they're thumbing around looking for information and grasping at straws. Okay, I always say, imagine if you were that parent on the other side of the table, how much confidence would you have in that teacher? Okay. And again, we want to make sure we sustain healthy relationships with those parents. Okay. We want them to be active and we want them to trust us. But if we go into a meeting not prepared, it's going to damage that trust. I feel like I've always told my SPED teachers that make sure you are prepared when we go in there. Okay. Send a message to them that you have your stuff together, you're prepared, and you know what's going on. All right. It's a big thing in front of those parents and your building administrator too. They don't want to come in and see that. All right. So again, just making sure you present it in a clear, easy to understand manner. Okay. Kind of went over that. Here's your guideline right here. All right. Any questions on that on the video? Man, everybody's quiet. Everybody's quiet this evening. It's the end of the semester and everybody's tired, I guess, huh? No questions on the video. Everybody feels good. Remember, guys, that's a quick turnaround. I want to remind you that, okay? One thing I will bring to your attention, just more of an FYI, a heads up, seeing this happen, is if you Or uploading a video, sometimes when it may appear to take a long time and you just see that wheel spinning, we tend to see that happen more often when people are using Internet Explorer as their browser. For some reason, that's where we see it at. Always encourage you to use Chrome or Firefox, one of those two, as your browser. It's least likely that you will run into that problem. So I'm just throwing that out there, maybe to save you some frustration and stress. But it usually always happens at least once a semester. And I'll get an email and I always ask them, are you using Internet Explorer or are you using Chrome or Firefox? Okay. Just keep that in mind. All right. Any other questions? Everyone good? I'm going to do a stop screen share quickly and switch over. There was a short slide deck I want to share with you. It's just on interpreting test results. I believe it's chapter 13 slide deck. So if you'll bear with me just a minute, let me get that pulled up. Let me get over there quickly and stop that. Zip through it. Okay. Switch over and I'll do my screen share. This won't take long. Like I said, it's got 12 slides. It's pretty short. So just kind of want to go over it now that we've talked about different tests and interpreting those. And this is a lot about what this slide deck is. So just kind of the brief introduction. We use test results and we interpret those to present to provide clarity for educational and behavioral strategies. Okay, we use that as a guide to come up with a plan for those students and show what their present levels are. Again, we use them for educational planning, and the strategies are to use those to help provide educational success for those students that are struggling. Okay, eligibility. When we're looking at eligibility, it is determined by a set of criteria that's stated in IDEA. Okay, so we can't just go rogue and start qualifying kids just based on a gut feeling we have. Okay, we need to use the data and take a lot of information into account before we determine if they're eligible. Eligibility decisions are a determination where the student will receive special education services. Those decisions may vary from state to state a little bit, okay? And state criteria may not exclude students who would qualify for special services under IDEA law, okay? So sometimes we're looking at state law and we're looking at federal IDEA law. So we need to make sure that the state law does not basically override the guidelines by IDEA. Okay. Looking at the holistic view, the overall picture of the child. Remember, we've talked about adaptive behavior skills on how they function in different environments, right? At home and also at school. So this is just talking about the holistic view. We want to make sure that we look at their environment at home. Are their basic needs being fulfilled? Physiological, psychological needs? Is the family at home kind of the shaper of that student's environment? Is the student active in helping form their environment? We need to look at how well the student adapts. Are they having health issues as well? Are there behavior issues? How do they function at school? How has their past behavior and academic functioning been? So we've got to do some research and collect some data on that. And that's why we do the adaptive behaviors, and then we do the assessments, and we also get feedback from classroom teachers that's had the student or any healthcare provider, whether it's nurse, speech, could be medical doctor. Okay. Suggested procedures. We need to secure parental permission, right? Everyone pretty much knows that. We just can't decide, hey, Johnny needs to be tested. Bring him down to my room this afternoon at 2 and we'll do it. Okay. It doesn't work quite like that. Okay. We got to get parent permission. We need to make sure that we do any necessary screening for sensory impairments or physical problems. We need to rule that out. Need to meet with the parent. get some information from them through an interview. We'll do intellectual and academic assessments. Okay. That's normally through the normed reference. Some of you guys use the WJ4. Some of you guys use some other ones working with your qualified person in your district. Those are what we're doing. Behavioral assessments may come into play if we're suspecting some characteristics of being categorized as ED for emotional disturbance. Test interpretation. We want to rule out any sensory acuity problems and refer or consult with medical professionals if there's any type of medical issue that might be suspected, because this could play a role in it. Want to determine whether we have home conflicts are present, enlist the services of school counselor and a school psychologist. Okay, those conflicts could be obviously leading up to some issues. We also want to look at their previous educational experiences and how have they influenced that student's overall academic achievement. Okay, so we want to look at determining whether learning or school problems are exhibited in a particular school environment associated with one subject or a particular teacher, peer, or adult. That could be, especially when we get ready to do functional behavior assessments. It could be that one particular teacher that is a trigger. Seen it happen. It could be another peer or classmate or another adult in the building, okay, that serves as a trigger. We also want to compare intellectual, academic, and adaptive behavior measures or their scores. We do that during the testing phase. We do comparisons between the intellectual or the cognitive test and the academic to look and see if there's major discrepancies. And then we also do a comparison at their adaptive behavior scores. Okay, if you remember the adaptive behavior scales I talked about the last week or two, okay, often at times on an initial evaluation, you're going to be asked to do them. I gave you an example. The one I used is a Vinland 3. It's very extensive, gives you a lot of information. Okay, we want to determine whether any emotional or behavior problems exist. I want to bring this up one more time, challenge you to go look at it. I mentioned this about 3 weeks ago. I'm going to talk to you about it again quickly. We're looking at students with possible categorization for emotional disturbance. Okay, there are 5 criteria that we have to look at. The 5 criteria for emotional disturbance. And if you remember, I shared with you, if you look at those, they're very vague. I can almost guarantee you any one of us on Zoom tonight has experienced any two of the 5 in this last week. So if you go back and look, so again, you want to really make sure you do your homework and you have your data on that before you put that label or categorize that student on it. But if you get a chance, I would challenge you to pull those up and look at those criteria for ED. Very vague. Okay. We want to determine whether there's any speech language problems that are present, especially we see that more often with our younger students. Okay. And we want to consider and assess any language factors that might impact achievement. Okay. And those definitely will, for sure. Okay. Next one, looking at interpreting test results. We administer the assessments through formal and informal settings. You guys have got to do a little bit of that. And then we interpret those. We look at the results to determine their student strengths and weaknesses. Just went over that with you, making sure you identify those in those reports, right? And we take those and we use them in planning. We have an inter-individual interpretation. We're comparing that student to a peer norm group. We did that norm reference, right? It's normed. It's compared to a large group of peers, same grade level, same age. The other interpretation we could use is intra-individual. We compare a student with his or own performance. Doing that on informal assessments. We're doing that on CBMs and criterion reference test. Okay, basically it's comparing the student against himself or herself on that. It's not comparing it to a group. We talked a little bit about IQ and adaptive behavior. I believe maybe last week on the slide deck, could have been the week before. Okay, these often are administered by a school psychologist or school psychometrist, which are educational diagnosticians. Our goal is to go in and pinpoint strengths and weaknesses when we interpret that. That's what we're doing when we come in and do the MEGs and we present all the information. We interpret cognitive measures and they may refer to patterns of functioning. So we're looking at similarities and differences between specific areas, verbal and nonverbal skills. The next thing that we might do, it's not uncommon, is use what we call cross battery assessment. We interpret a student's skills and abilities across different assessment instruments. So I might give a cognitive with the WJ4, the WIS5, I might use the academic and do that and then compare the differences. Should see consistencies. Okay. Educational achievement. Educator may be responsible for administering some type of norm reference test. There are a few you can do. I mentioned them. You got the star reading of math. Okay. Oftentimes, if you use map testing, I mentioned that a lot of districts across the country are starting to use that. It's administered in a classroom. Okay. You go through a little training, you administer, it's sent off and scored. Okay, we do this to ensure accuracy of the administration of the exams or the tests. We use inter-individual, which I just mentioned, comparing against a large group, or we use intra, comparing their strengths and weaknesses against themselves. We write up the test results, which you guys have been getting practice doing that. Okay, most reports usually contain the same information. Okay, I'm gonna scroll down. This is the recommended format right here. You guys pretty much have been doing this in this class, right? We have identifying information. That's usually your first section you've been doing, right? In the first two reports you got on this one. We're giving background and maybe the reason for referral. Background, referral, classroom observation, pertinent or parent information. Always say pertinent family information. Second area, we get down to test results. We show them the results of the test. Okay. It could be a lot of information that we present. We use tables, charts, and graphs. We use a narrative format and we explain it both ways so they can more easily understand. Okay. The tables, charts, and graphs really help. Then we're going to get into an interpretation section. So when I come in and do the testing on my comprehensive report, this is where I do the full interpretation, provide those explanations with leading up to my recommendations. Okay, it gives them a lot of information on strengths and weaknesses, how they score compared to their peers in the norm group. And it also is going to predict based on their current assessment score, how they're going to perform moving forward. Okay, whether it's a skill that's a strength or a skill that's a weakness, it will talk about little Johnny will typically struggle with this type of skill moving forward in his, academic progress, or it may say Johnny will find this particular skill easy in the classroom to perform. So it gives pretty detailed information. Last thing is we do summary and conclusion, just kind of provide an overall summary of the testing experience, a little bit about behaviors of the examinee. We make recommendations for any type of educational intervention, and then we also make recommendations for any type of further assessment that might be needed. Okay, so they may need some further assessment in certain areas. It could be behavioral assessment. It could be some further maybe going in based off the results I hear or I see and I present. It might be wise to go in and do a dyslexia screener just to rule that out. But based on the scores I'm seeing here, it definitely is an indicator that might be going on. And so you might recommend that. Okay. After all that information is presented, that's when the team starts writing their educational objectives and start forming that IEP. If they're eligible, if a recommendation is made and the data supports it, and they're eligible for services, then we're going to write goals and objectives and formulate that IEP. We want to include some behavioral short-term goals on that as well. If the students doing well, they can be positive. If they seem to struggle and get frustrated, we might want to write some behavior goals on that as well. Benchmarks, those major markers that provide evidence of a student's progress. Benchmarks could be done using probes, CBM, okay, and collect that data between then and the next meeting. Long-term goals, your anticipated progress. I mean, this kind of goes back to your question. Anticipated progress a student will make in 1 year upon which the short-term objectives and benchmarks are based. You're using that same one and you're going to project where you hope that they're going to be on that long-term goal. Okay. So that kind of goes back and supports the answer I gave you to your question. Okay. Reevals typically are done every 3 years. Okay. Rather than requiring a total comprehensive evaluation, some now consist only of the additional assessment determined in order to thoroughly review the case. So there are different ways to do this, but typically we go in every 3 years and do a reeval. Sometimes the parents may not request it. They may say, "No, not," especially if they're older. Okay, that's not uncommon, especially for like a junior, okay, upper high school. All right, but typically we do them every 3 years. So that's into that slide deck. I just kind of wanted to share that with you since we've been going through testing and kind of go over some of the processes for interpreting and then what we do after we interpret those as far as putting our um, goals and objectives in after we've determined whether they're eligible or not. So, is there any questions over that? I just kind of went through that quickly. It was short, but or any questions over the CBM or mock IEP? And it's crickets tonight. Everybody's just quiet. Okay, moving forward. Typically, since the 8th week or the last week of class is very short, and we normally meet on Wednesday, and your mock IEP is due Wednesday, I typically tell classes, "Hey, we won't need to meet unless I just get bombarded with a lot of questions, and I feel the need that we should." Okay, typically everyone's pretty much has everything after, especially doing this type of review on week 7. So I'll go in and I know I've got 8 weeks worth of participation points. Usually I just go in there on the 8th week and give everybody points. Okay. So we won't plan on meeting unless I just have a lot of questions and uncertainty from students and they need that clarification. I'll be happy to hop on and we could even do it before Wednesday because I know that IEPs do it 4 on Wednesdays. So I mean we could hop on and do an early one, but I don't really think there will be a need, and I'll monitor email and all that. And if I see we have a lot of questions, I'll send a message and say, "Hey, I'll be available on this night, Tuesday. Hop on. I'll answer any questions you got." Okay. But unless I get a lot of those emails, we won't plan on doing it. Okay. Any questions? Everybody good? Yeah. Okay. Thank you guys. I've enjoyed it and appreciate everything and look forward to seeing your mock IEP videos. So it's going to be on us pretty quick. So thank you guys again, and please reach out by email if you need me. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good
Thank
evening.
you.
Thank you.